As a small business owner, you deserve more. More confidence, more connectivity, more of the tools that help your business thrive. And at Cox Business, you can expect more from us. We don't just have sales reps. We have perfect plan identifiers. People who will work with you to make sure your business gets everything it needs and nothing that it doesn't. Your business deserves more, and that's why you can expect more from Cox Business. Call 800-526-8572 to switch today.
Prepare for glory!
I don't know if you got your popcorn ready. Do you got your popcorn ready? I came out the womb, I was ready.
And he's hit the end zone for an unbelievable touchdown.
I would be honored if you played football for this team.
Throw it up above his head. They can't jump with me. Golly.
Oh, they tackle him at the 40-yard line.
Who can make a play? I can. Who can make a play? I can.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast, proud members of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network. You can find them at FTFPodNet on Twitter. You can find me at SportsFanaticMB on Twitter, and my co-host for the day, Mr. Matthew Fox, at Nighthawk7734 on Twitter. We are just one of a ton of great podcasts that are a part of this network. The likes of Jim Day of FF Champs, Adam Ronis and Dr. Roto from SiriusXM Radio, Bob Lung of the award-winning Fantasy Football Consistency Guide, Dwayne McFarland, Blake Sullivan are just a bunch of other great podcasts, and you can find all of us on fulltimefantasy.com. Today's episode, Matt is jumping back on with me today again as we break down the last 6 games on the Sunday slate and the so-called game that we had on Monday Night Football. And we've got Mr. Matthew Fox with us again here today. Matt, how was your Monday night football and fantasy experience?
It was pretty good. I actually had a couple of matchups I was monitoring. George Kittle's performance put me over the top in my work league where the two highest scoring people by about 100 points were playing each other.
Oh, wow.
And his last touchdown put me ahead by 3 points. I'm sure the guy I was playing is crushed.
Yeah, I imagine that wasn't that always sucks when it comes down to that Monday Night Football matchup and you end up losing by like a couple points. Always drives me crazy. We were just talking off air a second ago there. We were playing each other in the FLA Riders League, and it looked like I had a chance to beat you. You had I think, what did you say, it was like a half-point lead, and I had Odell and Baker going into that game. Or no, Chubb and Baker going into that game, and then that obviously did not work out for me at all. Good old Baker Mayfield just causing me all kinds of stress and drama last night. Was not a fun game being a Browns fan, but we will definitely save that game, unfortunately, for the last part of this podcast. We will kick it off, though, with the rest of we had 6 games that we left we did not do yesterday. We'll do those from the Sunday games, and then we'll finish it up with the Browns and 49ers.
First and 10 at the Lions 29, and Prescott goes screen right. Elliott down the right side to the 25, to the 20, to the 10. Elliott to the pylon. Zeke Elliott, touchdown. 38 on the screen.
Second down at 10, takes the snap, gives it. Chubb runs, he's in the 15, he's in the 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. There goes Chubb, he's in the 30, 20, 10, 5, touchdown, Chubba Lubba Hub. 92 yards.
Marshawn Lattimore, 12 yards from Adam. Case on a deep drop, steps up in the pocket. He'll fire to the right side. Caught by Diggs. Stay up. Oh my God! Oh my God! 30. No. 10. Touchdown! Are you kidding me? Miracle finish! It's a Minneapolis miracle! Stephon Diggs and the Minnesota Vikings
first game that we're going to talk about was the Ravens and the Steelers, a game that went into overtime, a much more competitive game than I expected. I honestly thought with Mason Rudolph being out there for the Steelers that the Ravens would kind of pull away with this one eventually. But they kept it close, and the Steelers actually had a chance to go in and win it. A fumble at the end by Juju Smith-Schuster in overtime is really kind of what gave Baltimore the win here. Lamar Jackson struggles again, though. 19-28, 161, a touchdown, 3 interceptions, does add 70 yards on the ground to come in as QB 18 with 18.19 points. Mark Ingram, 44 yards on 19 carries and a touchdown to come in as RB 23 with 12.9 points. Marquise Hollywood Brown comes in at wide receiver 32 with 11.2 points, 22 yards, a touchdown on 3 catches. Willie Snead leads the fantasy wide receivers with 51 yards on 4 catches to come in as wide receiver 40 with 9.10 points. And then Mark Andrews just continues to dominate as a top-tier tight end. Does get the most targets on the day with 7 as well. 45 yards on 5 catches. Tight end 10 with 11 points. We saw Lamar struggle again in this one. I know you are someone that was in the same boat as me and that we weren't necessarily buying into Lamar's offensive outbreak in the first 2 weeks and him being fixed as a quarterback. It does seem like the defense, if they do a really good job of taking the run away and force him to throw the ball, he does tend to struggle, much like he did last year, but he does look better than last year. I will give him that. Outside of Ingram and Andrews, do you trust playing anybody else on this offense?
No, I said last week, I think Ingram is in iffy one. I think Lamar Jackson you're probably playing. Given where quarterbacks been, even big name guys like Aaron Rodgers are middle of the pack in terms of quarterbacks. Yeah. So Lamar Jackson with his rushing ability, I think gives you a safe floor. And even though you're not going to see the lofty highs, I still think he's worth a play. Ingram's kind of an interesting one. I still feel like he's a little bit in that Derrick Henry class for me in that you're kind of, if he gets you a touchdown, it's a fine day,
Yeah.
But 2 receptions for 5 yards, he's not a huge part of the passing game. Their passing game in general, I think, is sort of iffy week to week. He had 19 carries, which you like, a little bit better percentage than he had the week before, but only 44 yards. That touchdown is what really props you up. That's probably what makes this day better than last week when he was more efficient, just didn't get as many touches and wasn't as needed. I had actually picked the Steelers in this game. I think that the Ravens defense has issues that we're just starting to realize because of the schedule they played early.
Yeah.
And I think, Lamar Jackson probably has grown as a passer, but the first 2 games of the season against 2 really soft defenses in Miami and Arizona, I think gave us a little bit of a false impression. He struggled even a little bit against Kansas City, which isn't the toughest pass defense. And as they get into their schedule, I think he's coming back to earth a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's again something we've talked about. Neither one of us, and I know Dennis wasn't as high on Lamar Jackson. In fact, I put out on Twitter after week 1 when you had all those people out there high-fiving themselves talking about how they were saying Lamar Jackson is the best quarterback since Michael Vick and all this, and I was like, maybe you guys want to pump the brakes just a little bit. They were playing what we all consider to be the worst team in the NFL in the Miami Dolphins. Like, let's not jump up and say that Lamar Jackson is the best quarterback in the league right now. He obviously had 2 great weeks, but you could even go back to the game last week where he got destroyed by the Browns. And you mentioned the Chiefs game, like even the Chiefs game, his day does not look at all that good if he doesn't get those 2 YOLO passes that we talked about. And then same thing with the Browns. He was going up against like 3rd and 4th string cornerbacks and defensive backs on the field for the Browns, and yet still struggled in that one. It was the last touchdown to, I think it was actually Willie Snead, where he caught like a pass and got past the defender and scored like a 60 or 70 yard touchdown in garbage time that really kind of boosted his day up as well. So Lamar has definitely come back to earth. I agree with you. He is definitely definitely better than last year. Like, I've seen him make some throws this year that I don't think I saw him come close to making last year. So he's definitely improved, but he's not a finished product either. We can't say that he is what he is. He's young. He's still, building into the NFL, learning how to pass the ball as an NFL quarterback, because he was not asked to do that a lot at Louisville. So I still think Lamar Jackson has a high ceiling. I don't know if he reaches that this year. I agree with what you were saying on Ingram. In fact, I believe we were both on the sell high train for him last week, and I'm still there. If you can sell high on Mark Ingram, I would do it, because as you mentioned, he's just not doing anything in the receiving game, and I think that's what's going to be key for him moving forward. If they start getting in these games where they're behind even more and more and they go away from the run, Mark Ingram is not going to get you anything. So if you can, sell high on him now, because they do have an interesting schedule moving forward. They've obviously got some games, Bengals. My goodness, I can't think of who their other guys are. I know the Bengals. They've got, really, and the Jets, really, for me, is it on their schedule that are beatable. After that, you've got the 49ers. We saw what they did. The Patriots, Seahawks, Rams, Bills, and the Browns and Steelers again. So I would honestly be really worried about Mark Ingram keeping up that high-end value that he has right now. So if you could, I would sell high on him. On the Steelers side, we saw Mason Rudolph unfortunately get knocked out of this game on a pretty vicious hit. I don't think there was any malice or intent behind. My goodness, who was it that hit him? I just had his name in my head and it jumped out. Who was it?
Earl Thomas.
Earl Thomas. Yeah, there we go. Earl Thomas. Yeah. And it was, if you watch the hit, he was dropping his shoulder. It looked like he was trying to hit shoulder to shoulder. Unfortunately, his head just kind of caught Mason Rudolph in the chin, completely knocked him out before he even hit the ground. Before that was 131 yards, a touchdown, 13 of 20, finished the day as QB 23 with 14.49 points. We saw Devlin Hodges come in and actually look fairly decent for the most part, 7 and 9, 68 yards, finished as QB 29, 6.47 points. He will at least be the starter for the Steelers this week. We'll see how long Mason Rudolph is out. I cannot imagine that he plays this week. I don't think he's been ruled out yet, but I don't see any way he plays this Sunday. James Conner gets you 55 yards, a touchdown on 14 carries to come in at RB29 with 11.5 points. Juju has a bounce back game here. Wide receiver 13 with 20.75 yards on with a touchdown on 7 catches. James Washington actually came alive a little bit with Devlin Hodges as well. 52 yards on 3 catches to come in as wide receiver 39 with 9.7 points. And we got a Vance McDonald sighting in this one. 34 yards on 3 catches. Tight end 21 with 6.4 points. I guess the big question for me is going to be, we know at least Hodges will likely be in this Sunday. Outside of Juju and Conner, which I feel like you have to start because there's chances are, unless you're playing in like an 8 or 10 man league, you don't have the depth to replace those two, especially where you drafted them. So outside of Juju and Conner, are you willing to start anybody in this offense until at least Mason Rudolph comes back?
No, it's a decent matchup with the Chargers. We saw Denver have some success last week in Los Angeles. It's a night game, so you never know. I thought Hodges looked decent. A week of preparation might help him some, but it's really hard to trust who a secondary wide receiver would even be.
Yeah.
Past Juju Smith-Schuster. So really, I think it's kind of just those two.
Yeah, if I had to guess, I would still say it's Deontay Johnson. We saw him really kind of come on there with Mason Rudolph. Again, James Washington actually got most of his work with Hodges, but I'm with you. Unless you're in a super deep league and you just want to take a shot and throw one of those out there, but I would not feel comfortable at all. I'm with you. It's Juju and Conner for me, and that's it.
Well, that's how I feel. Like Deontay Johnson, I'm still rostering him.
Yeah.
But I thought his real value and the upside we were seeing is he really had something going with Mason Rudolph, and with him not in there, I don't know that you're feeling super comfortable starting him.
Yeah, and I would say, unless there's some news that comes out between now and Sunday's game where they say Mason Rudolph is out the rest of the season, I would not drop Deontay Johnson. I would hold on to him because, as you just said, he did have great chemistry with him. Chances are Rudolph will likely be back by next week, hopefully. Obviously his health comes first, and we hope that he's going to be okay. So if he's back by next week, then I would feel comfortable throwing Johnson back in there. So he's not someone I would drop until, or unless you hear that Rudolph is going to be out. And in all honesty, even then, I would probably hold on to him because, as you mentioned, Hodges did look decent, and maybe a week of preparation, we see him kind of start getting a connection with Johnson, which we saw really, as you said, Rudolph have with him. I
think the real thing is Johnson seems like if you're going for a second receiver on the Steelers, Moncrief is not even out there anymore, thankfully. Yeah. We had hope for Washington, but it seems like Deontay Johnson is having the breakout season that we thought Washington might have, so
yeah,
just something to keep in mind.
And something else to watch too. I was almost going to skip right over this. Jalen Samuels actually had a knee scope, and so he will be out for at least a month, I believe, was what the reports are saying. So that's definitely going to give an uptick to more than likely the wide receivers or James Conner, who we've not really seen involved in the passing game. Before we move on from the Steelers, I guess I should ask, Does Benny Snell pique your interest at all? I mean, we've really seen them kind of using Samuel and James Conner here in this in the backfield. I don't think Benny Snell does not have nearly the pass catching ability that Jalen Samuels does. So do you think that moves Snell really just into a backup role for Conner, and we see Conner kind of taking the full workload like we did last year?
Yeah, I think so. It seemed to me the last couple of weeks where we've really seen Samuels come out. Because Conner actually made most of his points as a receiver in that game against the Bengals.
Yeah.
Where we really saw Samuels getting involved is they were running a lot of Wildcat. And that wasn't as effective for them against the Ravens with Samuels. He only threw it twice, and one of those was an interception.
Yeah.
We really only saw him get a couple of carries and only have a couple of catches. I'm hoping this, maybe this will do for Conner a little bit of what we saw the Jamal Williams injury do for Aaron Jones. Mm-hmm. Maybe go back to, okay, well, we have one running back now we can feature instead of, well, we have a couple of guys. We need to figure out how to get them all involved. I feel like from a fantasy perspective, that is killing us with a ton of teams this year. That's what I constantly harp on with Denver. It's not that I don't think Royce Freeman and or Phillip Lindsay are both good and talented. It's trying to figure out how the coach is going to decide to deploy them because they feel like they need to deploy them both. I feel like we were getting that a little bit here with Pittsburgh throughout this season, that they saw something with Samuels at the end of last year. They don't want to just leave him on the bench for nothing. And they've been trying to find ways to get them both involved. But when you do that, the real fantasy gold when it comes to a running back and what a lot of people thought we would get with Conner is what we saw the first 12 weeks last year, where he was number one. He's getting passes, he's running. It's that real 3-down involvement. So I'll be curious to see with Samuels out if they commit more to doing that with Conner and if it's successful. The other thing, Mike Munchak left as the offensive line coach in Pittsburgh. You have to wonder if that's taken a little bit of a toll on their product, because it doesn't seem like they've had as much success running the ball in general as they have in a couple of years past.
Yeah, that's a good point, because a lot of people are kind of blaming that on Conner and saying that he was kind of fool's gold, not quite what we thought he was last year. I would say I'm sure it has something to do with Conner, but I like the Mike Munchak call there, that it might have something to do with it as well, because he is widely regarded as the best offensive line coach in the game. The next game that we're going to talk about is the New England Patriots and the Washington Redskins. New England winning 33-7, moving to 5-0, and dropping the Redskins to 0-5. On the Patriots side, Tom Brady goes off in this one, finishing his QB5 with 36.92 points. He goes 348 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception on 28 of 42. We saw Sony Michel actually have a really good game here, finishing his RB9. 21.3 points in this one, 91 yards on 16 carries and a touchdown. And stop the presses, we have breaking news.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. And I need all of you
to stop what you're doing and listen.
He actually caught 3 passes. I mean, he got involved into the passing game. So, all right, Sony Michel. I love it. He's back.
He lives.
Yeah, he is. I'm happy. As someone who drafted Sony Michel, see him out there catching passes is just phenomenal. So as I said, 32 yards on 3 catches in this one. Again, finishing as RB9. James White has a solid day. RB22, 13.2 points, 46 yards on 6 catches, adds 26 yards on 6 rushes. Julian Edelman has a fantastic day here, which was kind of surprising because there was a lot of talk about him possibly not even playing in this game. 110 yards on 8 catches and a touchdown to come in as wide receiver 10 on the week with 25 points. Josh Gordon struggled a little bit in this one, just 59 yards on 5 catches, did get 8 targets, and then they did miss him on a touchdown pass. It was a little over his head had he caught that, obviously a much better day. 10.9, wide receiver 34, and then the big news, Ryan Izzo at tight end, 39 yards and a touchdown on 2 catches. Again, they were playing one of the worst defenses in the NFL right now. Explains why they had such a good day. They did struggle last week a little bit against the Bills. For me, obviously, Gordon, Edelman, White, and Brady, for the most part, are obvious starters every week. You don't have to question it. There's 2 people that I want to talk to you about. Is Michel back? Are we finally back in believing in Michel? Do we think he is good to go? And then what are your thoughts on Izzo? They dropped Ben Watson, or they released Ben Watson. It's not fantasy. They released Ben Watson. So it comes down to now Izzo being the tight end. Do we think he has any kind of fantasy upside moving forward?
I don't think it's just Izzo because Matt Lacoste has been their starter, and I was watching periods of that game where they were trying plays to Lacoste. So I don't think it's going to be a one focus tight end. I just think they were okay with what they had at tight end. But to me, that was probably one of the most shocking things. I don't know about you, but I had stashed Watson in a few leagues. You figured when he came out of retirement to play there, that was going to be big. So kind of interesting. I would not say I'm trusting Izzo, but Sony Michel, it was nice to see him back involved. They've said for a couple of weeks they were going to try to feature him. Didn't really pan out when you're playing a team like the Bills, but it looks like they wanted to get him going. Burkhead was out in this game, so I don't know how much that's going to affect things. I feel like this is classic New England. They have 2 or 3 receivers they like. They have 2 or 3 tight ends they're going to play. They have 2 or 3 running backs they like. And depending on what's popping when, they're going to go off, which is great. And from an NFL perspective, that's what makes them so dangerous and always so tough to game plan for. But from a fantasy perspective, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I mean, the good news, I guess, for Michel owner, if it did have something to do with Burkhead, there's a lot of talk that he's likely going to be out for the Thursday game as they play the Giants here in just 2 days. And the Giants' defense is not much better against the run, so that might be at least you get 2 good weeks out of Sony Michel before Burkhead comes back. Hasn't been ruled out for sure yet, but there is a lot of talks that he will not play. On the Redskins side, we saw Colt McCoy get the start, 18 of 27, 119 yards and an interception to come in as QB 28 with 8.6 points. At the running back position, Chris Thompson continues to pretty much be the guy in the receiving game mostly and doing a little bit in the rushing. 21 yards on 4 carries and then get you 17 yards on 5 catches to come in at RB 38 with 8.7 points. We saw Steven Sims Jr., freshman, rookie wide receiver, come in at wide receiver 21 with 14.6 points, a 65-yard touchdown run, and then he did absolutely nothing in the receiving game, 2 catches, 1 yard. Not anybody I'm worried about for fantasy, but at least he did show up in this one. But it's Terry McLaurin again. Most targets right there with Chris Thompson, 7 targets, 3 catches, 51 yards, still dealing a little bit with the hamstring issue. Wide receiver 45 with 8.1 points. I mean, we talked a little bit about this yesterday with Jay Gruden being fired and all the drama and everything surrounding this team. I think for me, moving forward, Chris Thompson, low-end flex play, and then Terry McLaurin is really the only guy I trust putting in my lineup every week. What about you?
That's 100% correct. There's Stephen talk now. Will Jordan Reed ever come back? I think it's looking pretty bad. He's had a lot of concussions, out without concussion again. They don't have a very good offensive line. They don't appear to be making any strides or are able to make any strides to fix that. It doesn't look like Trent Williams is coming back. So all those people that held out hope we were going to see another 1,000-yard season from Adrian Peterson, at this point he looks like he might be lucky to have a 500-yard season. We have no idea if and when Geis might come back. I think no one has even talked about him in weeks, which kind of makes you wonder. At the time, there was a lot of hope it was only going to be a few weeks. So the Redskins are really not a great team, and honestly, it's gonna depend on the matchups too, whether you even want to play McLaurin. Like, I love him, but I didn't throw him in any lineups this week because I figured he was getting Stephon Gilmore, and he did okay, but it certainly sucked the top off of it. Chris Thompson seems to have a relatively steady floor, but he's not putting up any incredible numbers either. When the Redskins, we thought that we would see some good performances when they played in a mediocre defense like the Giants, and that didn't happen. This is probably the week. If you're ever going to get an explosion from any of the players, it's going to be in the Tank Bowl against Miami.
Oh, yeah.
But beyond that, it's going to be rough. We talked about it yesterday. Callahan seems really committed to sticking with either Colt McCoy or Case Keenum. And Keenum wasn't terrible to start the season. He had some decent games, but it just feels like that entire organization is in turmoil. And, they're barely a notch above the Dolphins, in my opinion.
Yeah, so when you talk about Jordan Reed not coming back, I take it no faith in Jeremy Sprinkle, huh? You don't think he has a chance to be anything fantasy relevant?
Yeah, I'm not really. I mean, Vernon Davis, I would argue, is a better talent than Jeremy Sprinkle, and we weren't really seeing a huge push from him. Jordan Reed, there was always that hope that we'd see something close to the flashes we'd seen before, but I don't even know how good I'd feel about him at this point in time. They paid a lot of money to Paul Richardson. A lot of people had hopes for Trey Quinn. We just aren't seeing it consistently enough. Now, when you're in the depths and you have some of these bye weeks, I think there's 6 teams out this week.
Yep.
That may give you some pause. There's going to be times where you have 4 to 6 teams that are all huge fantasy relevant teams, so you may have to go down in the depths. This week, if you had to cover for some of those bye weeks, I might be more willing to take a chance on a guy because they're playing Miami. But then again, some people were making jokes. It might be the first 0-0 game in NFL history, and the way they're going, I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, man, with as bad as Miami's defense is, they've got to at least get 3 points on the board. I mean, I would imagine they at least get 3. It's going to be like a 3-0 game. And you're going to think it's a defensive struggle, but really it's just the offenses both suck. Next up, we had the opposite of that in a massive shootout between the Falcons and the Texans. Falcons 32, Texans 53. For the Falcons, Matt Ryan comes in at QB2 with 45.9 points, 32 of 46, 330 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Devontae Freeman continues to provide a little bit of value here. 30 yards on 11 carries, adds 40 yards on 5 catches and a touchdown to come in as RB14 with 18 points. And then all 3 wide receivers go off in this one. Calvin Ridley, 88 yards, 5 catches and a touchdown to come in at wide receiver 14 with 19.8 points. Mohamed Sanu, who I said to start on Friday's podcast, comes through for you. 5 catches, 42 yards, and a touchdown. Continues to ball out here 3rd week in a row. Wide receiver 18 with 15.3 points. Julio Jones, I take that back. He did not come through for you. 42 yards on 3 catches. Wide receiver 53 with 7.2 points. And then Austin Hooper continues to be a tight end 1. 56 yards, 6 catches, tight end 6 with 13.6 points in this one. For the Falcons, I mean, even though they continue to lose, all these guys continue to put up a ton of fantasy points. I mean, even when they're getting blown out, I can't remember what game it was a couple weeks ago. They really weren't in it until the 4th quarter. Go back to week 1 against the Vikings, same thing. They weren't in it, and then all of a sudden they start putting up points in the 4th quarter, and all their guys outside of Freeman came through in that one. I mean, are you really worried about anybody on this offense for fantasy reasons?
I'm still not that excited about Freeman. If you looked at, the touchdown helps, and he gets 5 catches for 40 yards. This was another one. If they're going to have a lot of garbage time, I guess you have to hope that he's getting receptions, but he had one fewer target and one fewer reception than Ito Smith. Ito Smith also had 5 carries for 19 yards, arguably looked just as good running the ball. I mean, Freeman, 30 yards on 11 carries. He had a 21-yard run, which means he also had 10 carries for 9 yards. I don't know that his efficiency is incredible. He gets a touchdown, which props some things up, but I don't know how much you can count on that. I mean, Julio Jones fans are nodding their head in agreement right now. Falcons, they were down. They had only scored 17 points going into the fourth quarter, so they kind of exploded for a couple of touchdowns because they were so far down in the hole.
Yeah.
They have offensive line issues. They have defensive back end issues. I guess the only thing to be excited about is from a passing standpoint, it seems like almost certainly they're going to be behind a lot continuing to go forward because I think they had another injury in that secondary. They already aren't looking that great, and then they had another injury. So there's definitely seems to be fantasy potential. I don't know that I feel rock solid about Devontae Freeman. I guess he might be one of those guys that just ends up like RB14 at the end of the season with me not feeling confident any week based on what we're seeing. But, I guess if your offense is out there a lot and putting up 30 points, you're always going to have a chance to be involved.
Yeah, I mean, for me, he falls much in that Mark Ingram territory where I would sell high on him, especially now. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people tried to sell high on him last week, where it was really by far his best game of the season. Now he's done it 2 weeks in a row, so you can probably still get, I would say, 90 cents on the dollar with that. I doubt you're going to get your full return of what you would hope to get for a guy that what used to be a top-tier running back. But I think you can probably get something good for him. In a dynasty league, I'd be trying to move him because I'm with you. I don't think he's good. I own him in a couple leagues, and I'm really trying to move him for something decent because I don't think that this continues to roll out the way that it has. Because as you pointed out, for those people who don't look that deep into the stats, it's the touchdowns that have saved him the past 2 weeks. Without those, he has very pedestrian days. On the Texans side, Deshaun Watson comes in at QB1 on the week with 4 touchdowns in this one. 5 touchdowns. 426 yards, 28 of 33, adds 47 yards on the ground, 58.7 points, won a lot of people their weeks with his running mate out there of Will Fuller, who finished as wide receiver 1 with 53.7 points, 217 yards on 14 catches and 3 touchdowns. DeAndre Hopkins comes in at wide receiver 17 with 15.8 points, 88 yards on 7 catches, and then the backfield just continues to be a pain in the ass. Carlos Hyde, running back 27 with 12 points, 60 yards on 21 carries and a touchdown. Duke Johnson gets 59 yards on 9 carries. And does add in 1 catch for 8 yards to come in at RB42 with 7.7 points. I mean, Watson and Fuller, whether they were on the same team or opposite teams, won people their matchups this week. Just ridiculous output by those two. What's even more surprising for me was how often Will Fuller was targeted as well. 16 targets, which was just insane. That doubled up the next best person, which was DeAndre Hopkins with 8. So they really kind of went to Fuller a lot, likely because Hopkins was getting double teamed. I don't know that for a fact. I did not watch a lot of this game, so I don't know what the reasoning was for him to get targeted as much as he did. But are you trusting Will Fuller now? I mean, has that performance right there, he went from wide receiver 63 all the way up to wide receiver 7 in just the 1 week. He's always been very boom or bust. We saw last year he actually went on a nice, I believe it was 4-week run with Watson before he got hurt. With that performance right there, is Fuller back? Is he worthy of putting in your lineup every week, a set and forget it kind of guy?
I think it depends on what you're expecting. If you're expecting that kind of production every week, you're probably going to be disappointed. But we talked about a little bit last week. He's had some fairly steady targets. He wasn't having huge and impressive days, but he had pretty steadily been second in targets, not that far off from Hopkins. I'm really kind of annoyed with myself because I had projected possibly when we were doing our Friday preview in print that it would be a great week to throw Fuller out there because what we had seen receivers do to this Atlanta secondary, and then I forgot to put him in a couple of my lineups. So I watched those 53 points on my bench and thought, well, hope I help somebody else because I didn't help myself. So if you're thinking you're going to get this every week, I think that's still going to somewhat depend on matchups. But I think he's still a decent play. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing we touched on last week was he actually had Deshaun Watson just missed him and DeAndre Hopkins last week for touchdowns. So Will Fuller, as you said, has been very involved. I don't think anybody, I'll just tell you right now, don't expect another 200-yard, 3-touchdown game from Will Fuller. That, I believe the stat I read this morning was that finished as like the 5th best game all time in fantasy at the wide receiver position. So this is not something that happens every week or even often within a year. So likely never going to happen again for him. Hopefully you were lucky like me and threw him in some lineups just because I was actually forced to. It's not that I wanted to. Obviously that worked out for me in the 2 leagues that I had him. But speaking of Will Fuller, as you said, he's really kind of been right there with DeAndre Hopkins in targets. DeAndre Hopkins, I think it's fair to say, has kind of sucked this year, especially where you drafted him. Most had him as the number 1 or number 2 wide receiver off the board, either right ahead of or right behind Devontae Adams, and he has not come through for you. This has not at all been the season we expected him to have, especially after what we saw last year with at least, I believe it was 70 yards or a touchdown in every game, a lot like Devontae Adams last year. He has yet to do anything outside of that week 1 game. Is it time to lower expectations on Hopkins?
I think it might be. I don't know if it's a product of the defense or what's going on, but you would think in a game where they were finally able to find some room and explode that you would get a little better outing from Hopkins, but really only targeted 8 times, 7 for 88. Not terrible, but not what you were hoping or expecting. Even when they played Tennessee the week earlier, Atlanta let both big receivers get in for touchdowns. I would have thought Hopkins in a game where they scored 53 would have gotten in the end zone. It just looks like it might be a bit of a tougher year. He still seems to be a focal point of the offense, but he's also probably a focal point of the defense, even more so with no Lamar Miller, because while Carlos Hyde and Duke Johnson have been okay back there, there's not a huge backfield threat. And I think that's just impacting a little bit of the way people are trying to defend them. Fuller has always been kind of their deep target guy. I feel like everybody now has a singular weapon to focus on in DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, and I should mention, I didn't have him, I didn't say his stats. I imagine not a lot of people started him, but Kiki Kuti actually showed up a little bit in this one. 3 for 72. Again, he had a 51-yard play, so really outside of that 51-yard play, didn't do much, but he got a little bit involved in the game as well. Next up, we've got the first of the only 2 afternoon games, which I absolutely hate when they only do 2 or 3 afternoon games, and they put so many on in the morning. But the Broncos get their first victory over the Chargers, 20-13. For the Broncos side, Joe Flacco, 14 of 20, 182 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception to come in at QB 25 with 13.48 points. Phillip Lindsay has himself a day, my guy. I hate that I traded him away last week. 114 yards on 15 carries and a touchdown, and adds 33 yards on 4 catches to come in at running back 7 with 24.7 points. Royce Freeman, RB38 with 8.7 points, 61 yards on 13 carries, 2 catches for 6 yards. Courtland Sutton continues to be a very good wide receiver, someone not being talked a lot about. Comes in this week at wide receiver 15 with 19.2 points, 92 yards and a touchdown on 4 catches. And Emmanuel Sanders struggles a little bit in this one, 9 yards on just 1 catch, just 1 target. Coming in at wide receiver at 90 with 1.9 points. As I said, the Broncos get their first win, give Vic Fangio that first win of the season, which I imagine felt good. They probably should be sitting at 3-2 right now. I feel like they really got screwed out of 2 games. But really, and in my opinion, have looked good in most of the games that I've seen them play in. Sutton has been extremely surprising for me. I know we talked about this last week because he had a really good game as well. Me and Dennis both said that we thought he was going to have a phenomenal season this year. Again, that was predicated on us not thinking Sanders was going to be back. Sanders has been back and for the most part been very good himself, and yet Sutton has been balling out. He's actually sitting just outside the top 10 at wide receiver for fantasy right now, a guy that I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to. So I want to get your thoughts on this wide receiver core, being the Broncos fan that you are. I mean, is it surprising to you seeing what Sutton is doing? And then what, are you worried about Sanders? Cause I'll say I did not get a chance to watch a lot of this game, so I don't know why he only got the one target. I'm hoping that you can tell us why it seemed like he was kind of uninvolved in the offense this week.
They didn't have a very robust pass offense in general. In fact, Sutton with 92 yards and a touchdown, a little deceptive. He had one long 70-yard touchdown grab. Aside from that, he caught 3 passes for 22 on 6 targets. So the way I think my perception watching the team play for 5 weeks is their offense is better than it was last year, but it's still not a huge high-octane offense. And I think they have pieces. Courtland Sutton, Emmanuel Sanders, and then Freeman. There are ancillary pieces that on occasion are involved or will have a day, like Fant a couple weeks ago caught a 25-yard touchdown pass, kind of boosts him up. But there's 4 main pieces that it seems like they feature. What I have gathered in watching this is you're only going to get 1 or 2 that have a great day at a time, and it's going to be tough to tell which one it's going to be. We've had Philip Lindsay has had a couple of huge games. I feel like if they more consistently featured him, they might do better. He had a couple of tremendous runs, and I thought overall he looked better than Freeman. Both of them ran better because this was the first game with Andy Janovich, our fullback, back from injury. He got hurt in the preseason, tore a pectoral muscle. It feels like the running game was a lot more successful this week, so they focused more on the run. Only 20 pass attempts for Flacco. Only 182 yards passing, and again, he had that 70-yard touchdown pass, which kind of inflates a lot of different things. The week before, when he threw for over 300 yards, both Sanders and Sutton had big days, and the running backs had kind of iffy days. So I think it's really, I mentioned last week it's going to be frustrating a little bit owning either of these running backs for fantasy purposes. I might change the corollary to it's going to be frustrating to own any of the Broncos week to week. I feel like Sutton probably has the safest floor at this point in time. He's steadily getting targets. He seems to be at least making catches and making at least one big catch a game. Sanders, I feel like it was a little bit of game plan. They had a couple of plays that they tried to go to him that were removed due to penalty. In weeks past, I've told you a couple of Lindsay's long runs have been pulled back as a penalty, and it impacts the way the box score looks at the end. But overall, I feel like Mike Munchak's impact on this offensive line has really been seen the last 3 weeks. Week 2, if you recall, watching Denver against Chicago, Garrett Bowles, the left tackle, got flagged for holding 4 accepted penalties, but a bunch more times than that were not accepted. He was just getting eaten alive. People were talking about the fact they couldn't block at all. You have not heard his name called in a good sense in the last 3 weeks. They have made, without Jawan James, who was their big free agent pickup at right tackle, he got injured week 1, hasn't played. This line has quietly been improving, getting better. And, with Andy Janovich coming back, I think you may see them lean into the running game a little bit more. I think that's something that Rich Scangarello likes. If you remember, he was with San Francisco last year, and San Francisco was very difficult to gauge which receiver was going to go off and which running back, because they would rotate, and somebody was always going to be successful, but you weren't sure who. That's part of the Shanahan system, as we've seen that still be the case with San Francisco, but I think you're going to get that a little bit here with Denver. And so, it might be frustrating. I feel like Lindsey's the safest running back choice, Sutton's the safest receiver choice, but I wouldn't be surprised from week to week if Freeman got a touchdown and was the better running back, or caught 5 balls and was the better running back, or if Sanders exploded and was the better receiver. They have 4 weapons. They're just one of those teams that's going to try to win games and is more interested in that than forcing it to one player, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, I would definitely feel fine or safe leaning on Lindsey and Sutton every week. You're going to get those duds from them. I mean, even Lindsey, I think in his bad games, is still giving you 7 to 10 points just because of what he's also doing in the receiving game. Even when he's not getting that many rushes, we're not getting a lot, whether it was due to the penalties or just Freeman looking better on those drives, but he's at least giving you a pretty safe floor, and as has Sutton. I mean, Sutton has really looked good. Like I said, it has been a weird year for fantasy, as we talked about yesterday, but still, Sutton sitting right outside the top 10 at wide receiver is not a fluke, and we all knew he had the talent coming into the NFL, so I'm with you. I would feel every week I'd be fine plugging both of those guys in your lineup. Sure, there's going to be weeks that you're not going to get production from them, but I feel like you can say that about just about everybody now outside of like Austin Ekeler and freaking Amari Cooper, who's all of a sudden become a stud, the best wide receiver in the NFL, which we'll get to here in the next game. And speaking of Austin Ekeler, on the Chargers side here, Phillip Rivers, 32 of 48, 211 yards, 2 interceptions to come in as QB 26 with 12.14 points. Austin Ekeler, even with Gordon back, has a really good day here, mostly in the passing game, though. RB8 on the day with 22.3 points. He only gets 3 carries to Gordon's 12, but gets you 7 yards. Does get 15 receptions for 86 yards. Melvin Gordon, 31 yards on those 12 carries, and only gets 4 catches for 7 yards, coming in at RB41 with 7.8 points. Mike Williams has the big day here at the receiver position, 74 yards on 6 catches. Keenan Allen, just 18 yards on 4 catches to come in at wide receiver 60 with 5.8 points. I'm not worried about Keenan Allen at all. I think this was, as I put in the notes here, he got Chris Harris. Chris Harris, from what I heard, again, I did not get a chance to watch a lot of this game, was covering Keenan Allen most of the time. We've sung his praises many times on this podcast already. One of the best cornerbacks in the league. I don't care who he's going up against. He's likely going to shut you down. I think Allen's going to be fine. The big question for me is Ekeler. We've seen him now. We're 5 weeks in and he has been an absolute stud. Has finished in the top 5 to 10 every single week. Melvin Gordon got a little bit more work this week. Likely he's going to come back and take a full workload, or take on the full workload within the next week or two. How much longer do you think we can trust playing Austin Ekeler?
I actually think Eckler is going to remain a flex option. San Diego doesn't have a lot of the Los Angeles Chargers do not have a lot of depth, it seems like, at wide receiver. You are right about Harris being on Keenan Allen. Mike Williams came in and out a couple of times, had a little back tweak, but they were using him. They're not getting a lot out of tight end. Maybe that changes if they can get Hunter Henry back and going. But I think that their offense, they really seem to hum with Ekeler. I saw several sets out there where he and Gordon were both out there. After getting gashed for over 200 yards by Fournette the week before, Denver actually made a couple of lineup changes on defense. They actually, their former starting tight end was inactive last week, and they put some different defensive linemen in there.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was just those changes or a combination of the changes and the Chargers struggling, but they really could not get any running game going. They could not give Phillip Rivers a lot of time. So he was having to make a lot of short, quick throws. I think we've seen that in a lot of the tougher defenses they've played. And Austin Ekeler is just a very talented weapon. I know Anthony Lynn talked about the kind of 70-30 split, but I'm wondering if that's more pertaining to the running game. And Austin Ekeler ends up still being a passing game weapon. And, you know, one of the reasons he's been such a valuable running back throughout the first part of the season has really been his passing game prowess. Yeah. He's been fine as a runner, but it's been the touchdowns, the receptions, the yardage as a pass receiver that have really done it. And, you know, I feel like he's almost the third receiver for the Chargers right now. And seeing how their offense went, like I said, both backs were in there a couple of times. I think it gives them a dynamic wrinkle. I do not think he's going away. I don't think you can expect the ceiling maybe that we had when he was the man back there, but I think he's definitely a flex play.
Well, that would make a lot of Ekeler fans happier, Ekeler owners, because people got him later in the draft, from 5th, 6th round with the Gordon news. That would obviously work very well for them if he's still viable in the passing game. And as you mentioned, Hunter Henry, there's a lot of talk that he will be back this week. So we could see Hunter Henry back, a guy that if some people may have dropped him after the injury, if he's available on your waiver wires, I would go snag him, although I'm not the biggest Hunter Henry fan in the world. Tight end is a very bad position, so anybody you can get that might be able to produce is worth it. The other afternoon game was the Green Bay Packers and the Dallas Cowboys. Not at all as close a game as the box score indicates here. 34-24 for the Packers. They were up big in this one. I can't remember exactly what it was, but they were up fairly, I was going to say easy here. They were up a lot. I know going into halftime, the Cowboys had only scored, actually they didn't score anything. Here we go. I was trying to find it. So they were up 31-10 going into the fourth quarter, and then a lot of garbage time production by the Cowboys kind of brought them back into this one somewhat. Aaron Rodgers, 22 of 34, 238 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, to come in at QB 22 with 14.9 points. The player of the day for the Packers, Aaron Jones, 19 carries, 107 yards, and 4 touchdowns, added 75 yards on 7 catches to come in at RB1 on the week with 49.2 points. Outside of him, though, there really wasn't anybody else. I mean, we saw Jimmy Graham get involved a little bit here. 41 yards on 3 catches to come in at tight end 18 with 7.1 points. But that was really it. Allison, not much. 28 yards on 2 catches. And then Marquez Valdez-Scantling had the 1 catch, and that was it. I really feel like for me, and I'm taking Aaron Rodgers out of this as well because he has definitely struggled. For me, outside of Aaron Jones and Devontae Adams, I do not feel comfortable starting anybody on this Packers offense. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Jimmy Graham's probably a dart throw tight end too. The targets just aren't there. He got 3 for 41, only was targeted 3 times. And he thought in a game where they didn't have Devontae Adams, he might get maybe some goal line targets that didn't seem to materialize. I think the real question too is, have we turned a corner with Aaron Jones? Jamal Williams is possible to come back this next week. Do they go back into a split, or has Jones finally said, hey, if you can actually feature me, I can do this for you? And they've turned a corner. That will be interesting to see.
Yeah, Aaron Jones truthers such as myself and owners are really hoping that the latter is true and that they just keep running him and using him more than Williams, because Williams has definitely looked decent at times, but I don't think he's got near the explosiveness or the ability that Aaron Jones has. On the Cowboys side, Dak comes in at QB6 on the week with 33.9 points, 27 of 44, 463 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Zeke really, outside the touchdown, does not do much in this game. 62 yards on 12 carries and a touchdown. Comes in at RB12 with 18 points, just 2 catches for 29 yards. Amari Cooper has himself a wonderful day here. 11 catches for 226 yards and a touchdown. Coming in as wide receiver 3 on the week with 39.6 points. And Michael Gallup in his first game back balls out as well. 113 yards on 7 catches and a touchdown, coming in at wide receiver 11 with 24.3 points. As I mentioned, a lot of garbage time in this game. The Packers were handily winning this. Really, the end of the third and then fourth quarter, they just kept throwing the ball, and Amari made a nice play where he kind of shook off Jair Jackson on the sideline and was able to run for a very lengthy touchdown. Michael Gallup had a nice touchdown catch. I do think that Gallup being there is actually starting to hurt Zeke. We saw it a little bit last year when Gallup really started getting involved in the passing game. Zeke started losing out less and less catches, and I feel like if you look at the box scores the past couple of weeks with Gallup out, Zeke has been getting targeted and getting more receptions, and now that Gallup comes back, he just gets 2 again. What do you think this means for Zeke and his future prospects here in the game? A lot of people drafted him as a high-end RB before, obviously, the holdout. Even if, say, the holdout never happened, he was likely going 3rd behind CMC or Barkley, maybe 4th if you wanted to take him after Kamara. I feel like if he's not going to be that involved in the receiving game, he's not going to finish as a top 5 running back. What are your thoughts on Zeke?
I think that might be the reality we're looking at because, the next few weeks, Dallas plays against some softer pass defenses, but then they start a stretch where they play tougher defenses altogether. They have Minnesota, Detroit, the Patriots, and the Bears in there. It certainly feels like they got a new offensive coordinator this year. Zeke wasn't there all offseason. They really were touting and developing their pass offense. It's a contract year for Cooper and Prescott, who are both looking to show what they can do. You add in Gallup in the mix, who's really come along, and I just think it could be a product of a better pass offense for Dallas has diminished a little bit of Cooper's Ezekiel Elliott's opportunities. It's almost to me the reverse of what we're seeing in Carolina, where it's really Christian McCaffrey, and then I don't know what you're going to rely on. At the beginning of the year last year, Dallas really had nothing going on in terms of passing targets. Now they even have Jason Witten back, that great security blanket. Randall Cobb is their third receiver, a guy who spent most of his career catching passes from Aaron Rodgers and bulking up a Green Bay offense. All of a sudden, there's a embarrassment of riches in the passing game for Dallas, and I think that gives them a different kind of offense. I would also say game script here scripted them out. A couple of weeks ago, they were up so big that they took Zeke out, and Pollard came in and ran for 100 yards. So, a little bit of this is fluky. He was easing himself back in at the beginning of the season. They've hit a couple of game scripts where they were negative. I think there will still be times where you get big Elliott games, but it almost might be where we're kind of seeing with Kamara. Kamara has had a couple of big games, but he's also had just a variety of steady and okay games. His floor is really great because of involvement, but you just may not be getting the high highs for Ezekiel Elliott this year.
Yeah, I think that's realistically the case here, and it's kind of sad to see a guy that a lot of people had talked about obviously being one of those top picks. He might be falling down here a little bit this year. Hopefully we're wrong, as again, a lot of people drafted him high. I know I took him high in both of in our FLA Riders League and a couple of my other main leagues when he was dropping down the board due to the holdout. I took him thinking he was going to have a good year, and I'm not going to lie, I'm starting to worry a little bit about that. So guys, I think it's time I need to finally admit or apologize to Mr. Amari Cooper. I've been saying you're average. You have brick hands. I've routinely called you Amari Brick Hands Cooper or Pooper, depending on the mood that I was in that day. You had a very good back half of the season there with the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott, and I did not expect that to continue this year. While I do still think you are a very good NFL wide receiver, possibly even elite, right there on the cusp of being elite for the NFL, I do not think that you are that great of a fantasy wide receiver. You have definitely balled out so far this season. Upwards of 20 points in 4 of 5 games. You reminded me just how much you can suck against Marcus Lattimore, but then again, he did go and shut down Mike Evans this past week, so maybe it was a fluke. Maybe it was a fluke. So I guess what I drafted this up for and what I was supposed to do here is apologize to you, Sir Cooper, as I have denounced you and spoken ill of you and being a fantasy asset this season. You currently sit as wide receiver 3 or 2, depending on your scoring in fantasy football because of how well you have played this first 5 weeks. So I guess I will not apologize. Are you guys kidding me with this crap? Apologize for Amari Cooper? Guys, I get it. He's been phenomenal. I can't take that away from him. He has been really, really good. Damn good. In fact, he's probably won you almost every single week that you have had him in your starting lineup in these first 5 weeks. Again, opposite of last week, where he only put up 9 points. but he has been phenomenal. But they haven't played anyone. This is the first game they played, and let's just be honest here. If fucking Jackson or Alexander, whatever his name is, knew how to tackle, he doesn't get a 70-yard touchdown run or 50, 60, whatever the hell it was. Who cares? Yes, he got a lot of garbage time production. Take away that garbage time production, what does he get? Nothing. I know, Matt, you're going to look at me and say, well, you know what? It still counts in fantasy. He got garbage time production. I don't care. Amari Cooper is not good. Okay, I take that back. He is good. He's decent. He is a very good NFL wide receiver. But I'm telling you right now, I'm sticking to my guns. If I didn't, I wouldn't be a very good fantasy analyst. I'm probably not anyways. I'm sticking with it. Amari Cooper is not finishing in the top 10 at wide receiver. It's final! That's what I'm calling for, and I'm sticking with it. I'm not going to back off my guns, no matter how often you Twitter trolls come at me or everybody else. Amari Cooper, while still a very good fantasy wide receiver, is not finishing in the top 10 this season. In fact, I would almost say sell high on Mr. Cooper. Let's move on to the next game now. We've got the Sunday night football game here. Was a defensive struggle between the Colts and the Chiefs. On the Colts side, Jacoby Brissett, 18-29, 151 yards, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception. Did get a 9-yard rushing touchdown. Did get a rushing touchdown, though, 9 yards on 6 rushes to come in at QB 21 with 16.9 points. Marlon Mack has a good game, 132 yards on 29 rushes, as 16 yards on 3 catches to come in at RB 15 with 17.8 points. And then T.Y. Hilton comes in at wide receiver 49 with 7.7 points, just 37 yards on 4 catches. Still a little bit banged up here. Really not much for me on this one. I thought the Colts did a really good job, showed how you can beat the Chiefs in dominating time of possession by running the ball and playing good defense, not really turning the ball over. My big question on the Colts side, neither one of us are Marlon Mack believers. He has not done really anything outside of that Week 1 game. Is it time to believe in Mack again?
I think Mack, because of volume and opportunity, is a strong RB2. And there's definitely some upside. You saw they definitely featured him, and he handled a pretty significant workload here. Get you 3 receptions and 16 yards when they only had 150 passing yards. Gets 29 carries, 132 yards. I think the plan here, it's going to vary a little bit from game to game. I think the plan here was to try to run a lot, dominate the clock, and keep the Chiefs' offense off the field, and that worked for them.
Yeah, on the Chiefs side, we saw Patrick Mahomes kind of drop down a little bit. He was humanized a little bit. He bled, and they took advantage of it. Did get hurt here. His right tackle stepped on his ankle, which I imagine did not feel good at all. It kind of hindered him a little bit. 22-39, 321 yards, and a touchdown to come in at QB 13 on the week with 26.04 points. Damian Williams led the running backs here. RB 46 with 6.8 points, 23 yards on 9 carries, added 15 yards on 3 catches. We saw Shady McCoy literally not get in a carry this entire game, but did get 23 yards on 2 catches to come in at RB 64 with 2.3 points. Byron Pringle was the man of the day here, 103 yards on 6 catches and a touchdown to come in at wide receiver 12 with 22.3 points. Hardman, wide receiver 31 with 11.3 points, 79 yards on 4 catches. Travis Kelce tied in 8th with 12.5 points, 70 yards on 4 catches. For the Chiefs here, obviously I do think some of it had to come back to Mahomes' ankle being hurt early in this one. We saw Watkins out with the injury. The big thing for me, we also know Hill is coming back soon as well, which I think will help this offense. The big thing for me is we saw Darrell Williams out there quite a lot as well. Didn't do anything box score wise, but was getting added into the rotation quite often. Are you trusting any of these running backs at this point in Williams, McCoy, and Darrell Williams?
No, I just think it's too hard to get a feel for what they want to do week to week, and they have too many guys. And, maybe in a couple of weeks, if we can see a more defined pattern, that'll help. But, it was a total wasteland for fantasy. I played Damian in a couple places, thought he might get featured. He arguably had more significant touches in terms of carries and receptions, but it was not a lot. It wasn't a great week for them either. it just feels like their whole offense has taken a little bit of a step back the last couple of weeks. I have to see. They're playing the Texans this week. Obviously, they were just involved in a shootout, so maybe that will open things up a little bit. But really hard to feel confident about any of the running backs based on their usage.
All right, time to talk about the game of the weekend or week or whatever you want to talk about. I really thought about just completely skipping this game altogether. The Cleveland Browns versus San Francisco 49ers. The Browns 3, 49ers 31. 49ers move to 4-0. On the Browns side, Baker Mayfield just struggled in this one. I don't even think that's a fair way to put it. He looked like shit. 100 yards, 8 of 22, 2 interceptions, lost a fumble, coming in at QB 34 with -2 points. Chubb was the only one who looked decent on the day for the most part. 87 yards on 16 carries, added a 1-yard catch for 12 yards. Again, RB 31 with 10 points. Jarvis Landry, wide receiver 30 with 11.5 points, 75 yards on 4 catches. Odell, wide receiver 63 with 5.25 points, 27 yards on 2 catches. The Browns, I made a joke on here that their bus broke down and they sent their freshman squad out there. At least that's what it looked like, because they just looked awful from the word go. I think it was awful play calling. The offense just looked bad. The defense didn't do much better. I do think, all things aside on how bad the team looked, they were actually in the game close into the end of the second quarter there until the pass that should have been a touchdown until Antonio Callaway, who's always struggled in catching the ball, kind of tipped the ball in the air at the goal line. They intercepted and returned it to about the 40-yard line. Then they ended up going and putting some more points on the board. I think that really kind of hurt the Browns. My big question with them is, what do we do with Beckham now? I mean, he's really only had the one good game, and that was really kind of a lucky touchdown play on that slant route where he took it to the house. Outside of that, he has done nothing. He has really not looked like he belongs in this offense. I don't know if that's the offensive line, play calling, Baker, whatever's going on here. Is it time, like I asked with DeAndre Hopkins, is it time to lower expectations? And what are we lowering our expectations to with Beckham?
Yeah, I'd almost say at this point he's almost in the Juju Smith-Schuster range. Just because, it's not necessarily because the offense is downgraded, but they also have another option with Jarvis Landry. They also have a running game they could choose to lean on. I think what we're seeing is hopefully they're going to be better games than this, but the next 4 weeks, they have a somewhat brutal schedule.
Yeah.
As they're home for the Seahawks, a team that's pretty much red hot, that just beat the Rams. Then they're on the road at New England. They're at Denver, a team that seems to be figuring some things out. You figure Beckham's probably going to get Chris Harris in that game.
Yeah.
And then they're home to the Bills, another team that's stifling on defense. To me, I probably am starting Chubb still. I'm probably starting both receivers. I don't think, even in a 2-quarterback league, I'm feeling good about starting Mayfield the next few weeks.
No.
He put up a -2.
Yeah.
He's going to have better games than that, but I think the weight of expectations, I always thought they had a better chance at really making a move second half of the season. I still feel like that's the case. It could be some rough sledding until it gets better.
Yeah, I mean, the only time I would feel comfortable, this is coming from someone who owns Baker in a lot of leagues, the only game I'm going to feel comfortable starting him right now is November 14th when they play at home against the Steelers, just based on what we've seen. And even then, I'm a little iffy because while Pittsburgh offense has not looked that good, their defense has been. Obviously, the week after, you have the Dolphins, which you would feel pretty comfortable starting him, but that's still 4 weeks away right now. So definitely a brutal schedule, as you mentioned. I mean, even if you think the Broncos are going to be an interesting game, that defense has looked good. And as you said, Chris Harris being on Beckham likely is going to shut him out. They seem to have, as you pointed out earlier, kind of fixed the run or fixed the against the run. So if Chubb is shut down, I'm not sure what their offense is going to be able to do. So yeah, I am seriously worried about them.
Just playing in Mile High at altitude can take effect. I think too for Baker, what you have to consider, and this impacts Chubb as well. The Browns' offensive line has looked a little more suspect than maybe we realized they were going to be. It seemed like we're more suspect week 1 because Robinson got ejected, but
yeah,
they haven't been incredible.
and they're going to face some pretty stout pass rushers as well the next couple of weeks. You know, guys who are known for being able to get in there. So it's, you know, the Browns have a lot of questions they need to ask. It might be worth wondering if Kitchens would be better off turning play calling duties over to an offensive coordinator so he can focus on managing the game. There was a lot of weight of expectations for Cleveland. I don't know if that was totally fair to think of them going from winless to the Super Bowl in 2 seasons. Yeah. I still think there are the pieces of a good team there. It may just take them half a season and some tough games to figure it out.
Well, I don't think it's a question. He needs to turn the play calling over to Todd Monken, in my opinion. And I'm with you on the offensive line. It's funny. We were all so excited about them getting Odell Beckham. We kind of overlooked the fact that they gave up Zeitler, who was considered one of the best guards in the game. And I do think that has really hurt them, because the one thing you could say about that line last year is they really only had the one weak spot, which was left tackle, where Greg Robinson did play fairly decent. Now they lose Zeitler and they're putting Hubbard in there at guard, and I feel like they've got a weakness on both sides of the line now. So I do think that has really hurt them. But, you know, something that we just mentioned about the offensive line of Freddie Kitchens is I do think that is part of the issue. One of the things last night that just drove me insane was San Francisco has 4 first-round picks on that front line. They have a phenomenal defensive line that was getting after Baker all day. Why you didn't take that aggressiveness and use it against him in some screen passes or some quick passes is beyond me. I still feel like they're trying too much to try and play this hero ball crap where Baker rolls out and is throwing these balls 30, 40 yards down the field. What, in my opinion, as I watched every single game last year, what really helped them was those short passing, which we saw just a couple weeks ago against Baltimore. The short passes, using the run game, and then using those the run game and the short passes to hit the big plays later on in the game with some play action or stuff like that to hit the big plays later in the game. They just seem to have completely moved away from that and just trying to score a touchdown on every play, and it's just not going to happen. We're not playing Madden. You're not playing in high school football anymore. This is the NFL. It's not even college football where you can do that in college. This is the NFL. You're going to play stiff competition every single week. Even Miami is going to give you fits at times. Why they seem content on just trying to throw the ball 80 yards on one play is beyond me. Hopefully they get it fixed. We'll see what happens. As you mentioned, not an easy schedule coming up for them. So there's as I said a couple weeks ago, there's a very realistic shot they're going to be sitting here at 2-5 coming into the middle half of the season here. And yes, they do have a weak schedule in the back half, but being 2-5 is not going to win you your division. And what we've seen in the AFC so far, I don't think going 8-8 or 9-7 is going to win you a wild card either. So rough sledding ahead for the Browns. On the 49ers side, they're 4-0 and sitting pretty right now. Did not have to do much offensively for the most part due to their defense. Jimmy G, 20-29, 181 yards and 2 touchdowns, to come in at QB 15 with 23.9 points. Matt Breida had himself a day, 114 yards on 11 carries and a touchdown. Also caught a touchdown pass as well. It was a 15 yards, 7-yard touchdown catch on 3 catches to come in, as I said, RB4 with 27.9 points. Tevin Coleman's first game back, he had a good game as well, RB19 with 15.7 points. 97 yards on 16 carries and a touchdown in this one. Wide receivers nobody really did anything here. Goodwin was the best, 41 yards on 3 catches. None of these guys really that relevant. George Kittle, though, finally has a huge bounce back game here, coming in at tight end 1 with 20.8 points, 70 yards on a touchdown, 6 catches, did get an 18-yard rush as well. Mentioned the defensive line just balling out in this one. Breida and Coleman split pretty evenly, actually, in this one. I think both of them are flex worthy. I'd be fairly comfortable starting both of them. But really outside of them and George Kittle, there's nobody I trust on this offense. These wide receivers seem to be up and down every single week. And Jimmy G really hasn't proven anything to me either throughout these first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. What are your thoughts on this San Francisco 49ers offense?
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's a little bit of whack-a-mole with the receivers. I like the talent of Deebo Samuel, but we haven't seen him establish himself. Marquise Goodwin has that speed, could hit a big one, but we haven't really seen that. Last night, Kendrick Bourne was in there, Pettis was in there. You just don't know week to week. what they're going to get done. And somebody I even heard on NFL radio talking about, well, just wait till Trent Taylor gets back there. He'll probably start getting a lot of targets. That's not what you want to hear. 49ers receivers, I don't know if you feel good about. Kittle, we talked about, he was steadily getting targets and receptions, and I just said all he was really missing was the touchdowns. Well, lo and behold, he gets the touchdown last night, and he's tight end one. I think all the people that lost faith on him, in my work league, you will love this, a small fantasy actual game aside. Last week when he was on bye after a kind of a mediocre start to the season, somebody cut him, and so I scooped him up, and I played him as my starting tight end last night against the guy who had cut him. And that guy has Aaron Jones, but I have Cooper and a couple of other people. We were the two highest scorers in the league. He put up in standard 10-team PPR, he put up 190.2 points. I had 175 points going into last night, and it was George Kittle that put me over the top. So I think he has some regrets. So all those people that thought, oh, well, Kittle just doesn't have it, he's the new Gary Barnidge, are rethinking their entire life plan right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have both preached on here since week one, where he actually had a fairly decent game week one, and again, had 2 touchdowns called back. I've been saying it this whole time, going into week 3, going into the bye week. So far this year, he had actually outscored himself last year, where he had a historic season for tight ends. He had more receiving yards than any other tight end in history in a single season last year, and he was doing better this year for fantasy. It's just been the touchdowns. He has just not scored touchdowns like he did last year. Finally got one this week. Obviously, I think Kittle is going to be fine moving forward. Before we get out of here really quick, we'll talk a little bit more about this on Thursday, but news has come out today that Evan Ingram has a chance, or it's likely he is not going to play Thursday due to a knee issue, and it also looks like Barkley is likely not going to play as well. I would not necessarily pick up Hillman at the running back position for the Giants. I do think he's only going to be in there this week, and I wouldn't trust anybody going up against the Patriots defense and how historically good they have been. But just to kind of give you guys a heads up on that, there was a lot of talk Barkley might play. Looks like it's leaning toward him not playing, and Ingram as well. Matt, thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to talking to you on Thursday.
Yep, sounds good. Have a good night.
Prepare for glory! I want to know if you got your popcorn ready. Do you got your popcorn ready? I came out the womb, I was ready.
And he's in the end zone for an unbelievable touchdown.
I would be honored if you played football for this team.
Throw it up above his head. They can't jump with me. Golly.
Oh, they tackle him at the 40-yard line.
Who can make a play? I can. Who can make a play? I can.
As a small business owner, you deserve more. More confidence, more connectivity, more of the tools that help your business thrive. And at Cox Business, you can expect more from us. We don't just have sales reps. We have perfect plan identifiers, people who will work with you to make sure your business gets everything it needs and nothing that it doesn't. Your business deserves more, and that's why you can expect more from Cox Business. Call 800-526-8572 to switch today.
A voicemail from a real Banner Health patient.
Kudos to all the staff that treated me that day. They were as quick as possible, as thorough as possible, and they gave me peace of mind.
We're here to help you breathe easier. Banner Health. Exhale.